This video is brought to you by MagicJank.com, the spiciest cards for your sauciest decks. Buy and sell Magic the Gathering products and gear today on MagicJank.com. Hello, Janksters, and welcome to another edition of the Magic Jank Podcast, the weekly show where members of Team MagicJank get together and talk about the latest happenings in Magic the Gathering. I'm Hamhawks42, and I'm joined by C. Ferverdo Jr. How you doing, bud?
Hello, everybody.
And then also Damien F16 in the house. Damien, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm tired. We did some commentating this weekend, didn't we, Ham? How you feeling?
We sure did. Yeah. It's always fun. Yeah, the Pizza Box tournaments are fantastic. Obviously, we're all fans. But it's fun doing the commentary gig because you're like, all right, yeah, I can be available. And you're just like, please let me be on top 8. Please let me be on top 8. Because nothing, I mean, it's all fun, right? It's all a good time. But with the Swiss, it just ends up being a longer slog because you've just got more rounds to cover. It just ends up being a longer chunk of the day. So, yeah.
Yeah, it does.
And that's what Damien and I did today. Yep.
It goes quickly. It does. Like, it does kind of fly by. But by the end of it, you're like, oh my God, how many rounds? Oh, there's one more round left. Okay, just one more round. Let me make it through this.
Yep.
But yeah, it's been good so far. It's interesting. You know, we were talking just before we started about the news this week. It's a bit of a slow week. We haven't had any new spoilers. We're kind of in between sets right now. We're waiting. The next set's going to drop in a month or whatever, or less than a month now. I'm not even sure. It's
two
weeks?
sets next month. You get
two. Oh, right.
Yeah, you get the Lost Caverns of Ixalan and the special release of the new Lord of the Rings set.
Because that IP hasn't expired yet, so let's go ahead and
milk it for all it's worth before that.
We still have the license.
Expires.
Let's go. Yep.
So a bit of a lull in the news week. Nothing huge. We had, Worlds happened a while ago. We had one significant tournament happen, which is an interesting one because it's a format that there's obviously content creators who do play this format, but most of the content creators I know don't play a ton of this, but it's historic. We had the Arena Championships happen on the weekend. Did you guys watch it at all?
Honestly, very little. I tuned in a little bit just to kind of see what was going on, watched a match. I think I watched a match. And it was fun, actually, because the name of the competitor was one I recognized from the Pizza Box tournaments. There was actually quite a bit of overlap. A lot of the folks who are regulars, kind of the regular top 8 folks at the Pizza Box, were qualified for the Arena Championship. Yep. It was kind of fun to see those folks step up.
Yeah, it's a weird tournament. It's a 32-player tournament. It's a very small tournament, and then to qualify, it's basically anybody can just spike a random qualifier and qualify for this tournament. Like you can get lucky one weekend and just get there, which is kind of crazy. It's a $200,000 prize pool for a 32-player tournament, and anybody can kind of qualify. But then when it's historic, it's like, oh, so okay, what are we gonna see here? What's the metagame? I always have these discussions on my channel. What's the alchemy metagame? What is the historic metagame? And without any challenge results and big tournaments happening where they release the data, like the way Magic Online has every week and stuff, we really have no clue. I mean, you can point to things like Untap.gg or MTGA, Assistant and these kind of apps that you have to register for to use, and then it tracks your data and compiles it with all the other people using the app. But the reality is a tiny sliver of the Arena population uses those apps, and so it really doesn't give you an accurate snapshot of anything. Basically, only the most entrenched players, this is what they're playing. Now, how does that line up against everything else? It's hard to say, right? So it was definitely some interesting decks. Do you guys want to talk about maybe the decks that we saw, or what ended up in the top 8, or?
Yeah, I mean, so it was historic, but then also don't forget Wild's Eldraine Draft. Which I'm always excited to see because I really enjoy drafting this format.
Nice.
But yeah, this was primarily, it was historic top 8, right? They all played with their historic decks.
Right.
And I will say I'm not surprised that first place got the winner was playing Is It Wizards because, like you said, Damien, sometimes we talk about these formats on our channel, but we don't really play them unless somebody requests to or something. And I feel like every time I go to play a match on the historic ladder, I either run into this first place Is It Wizards deck, and I have been for quite some time, or we were running into a Bowmaster Shieldred one-ring deck. I'm not saying that's all of what the historic format is, because that wouldn't be accurate, but a good portion of the time when trying to play a game on the ladder and Platinum or Diamond or Mythic or whatever, those were the decks we ran into. And the one that came in first place, the Is It Wizards, is very powerful.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's very, very low to the ground in terms of cheap mana costs. You know, this thing can win like turn 3 or 4.
Now, one of the controversial aspects of that deck, sorry, Hem, to cut you off there, but is the Symmetry Sage, right? This is what everybody's... This was a card that, and maybe even the reason this deck is so good, it's a big part of this, why this deck is good. They buffed this card, digitally, that is. It had some cosmetic surgery. Now, the real card, of course, operates differently than the Arena version, but the Arena version got a buff, and it's made the card very good in that shell, especially. Where, you know, what do you think about this kind of stuff where, yeah, the deck that takes down the tournament has a artificially buffed card in it? I mean, this is historic for you. What you know?
Well,
it's interesting.
I think, honestly, when it comes to Historic and Alchemy, at this point, the ship has sailed. The digital stuff, the digital erratas and the alchemy cards are here. They're just part of the deal. So that's one of those where I look at that and I think on the plus side, theoretically, they could modify that again. They could nerf it if it becomes problematic, where they could take another card in the deck and modify it to bring it back down if need be. That's the theory, right? Now, in practice, we have seen that Wizards is very, very, very slow to make alchemy changes that can impact these kind of meta situations. And is the Is It Wizards deck really problematic? No. I mean, I don't know, but, you know, Carlo, I'm with you too, is every time I play Historic, which is not often, unless I'm doing, you know, where I'm playing, you know, viewer submitted decks and they happen to be Historic. So it's like, well, I guess here we are. You know, but if I play Historic for 3 or 4 matches, I'm going to see this deck at least once, and it is going to house me. It just does. Because, you know, honestly, the card that I think is the most, you know, if anything's problematic in it, it's Reckless Rage. +3/+0 and haste for 1 alongside Dreadhorde Arcanist is disgusting. And then if you add if Symmetry Sage happens to be on the battlefield already, that's applying additional buffs on top of it. And it's like, and so Carlo, when you say that you can be dead on turn 3, you don't just mean the game is out of your reach by turn 3. I mean, your life total is 0. It is over by turn 3. That happens pretty frequently with this deck. It is nuts.
Yeah. And I mean, it's cheap to build. I'm not surprised you see it often on the ladder. It is, you know, we're talking a format that's almost on par with Legacy in terms of how broad it is at this point. It's the Legacy of Arena, I've heard people call it. So lots of, you know, very rare intensive, mythic rare intensive decks. You can play all kinds of stuff. So here's a deck that's cheap to play, very powerful, proactive. So again, a proactive deck, you don't really need to worry too much about, you know, what your opponents are doing. It's not like playing a control deck or some other thing where you have to, you know, anticipate what people are going to be doing and try and combat that. This is just, I'm going to do the thing, and like Carlos said, I'm going to kill you by turn 3. Can you stop me? And, you know, this is a format with Fatal Push. This is a format with answers to this kind of stuff, but it ends up being very difficult to answer everything because they have so many threats. And everything's so efficient that you don't find your Fatal Pushers, or if you only find one, that's not enough, right? So
probably it.
Yeah. Now, you know,
spicy deck.
Interestingly enough, if you take a look at the second and third players lists, second place came the Sandwise combo, which is also like pseudo Yawgmoth deck, and then third place was a Golgari Yawgmoth deck. Now, Yawgmoth is a very powerful card in Modern, right? Like, everybody likes playing that deck. It's like, it's just fun. Might not win all the time, but it's a fun deck to play. And when you take a look at like those alchemy cards or edited cards, whether they're buffed or nerfed, you see some of them played in those decks too, right? Like, for example, Cauldron Familiar in the Samwise combo deck. Cauldron Familiar was actually nerfed, and the only thing they nerfed about it is that said it can't block. But nobody really cares about that part of the card, right? So I don't know if that's really like a nerf. But it also has an alchemy version of Haywire Might in it, where it says when it dies, you gain 3, and you could pay a green and sack it and exile a non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. And I believe that's a buff on Haywire Might. It's stronger in Alchemy and Historic than it is as its original card. So it's very powerful to play those type of effects. And both Yawgmoth decks are playing that card. Granted, they're doing 2 different things, right? But also coincidentally, both of those decks play Orcish Bowmasters. And as we know, as of recent, there were 2 cards that were just recently rebalanced, and Orcish Bowmasters being one of them, right?
Right.
So for those of you who don't know, Orcish Bowmasters now lost the enter the battlefield effect on arena only, right? So it still does the other part, which is if opponent draws more than the first card of the turn, you get to amass 1 and shoot a damage at something. But no more ETB effects. No more opponent attacks you with an X1 and you flash in this Bowmaster and kill it and value engine. It doesn't work like that. So now those two types of decks are either going to have to find a different card to play, or they just become less good in this historic format, right?
Well, and just all of a sudden, that Orcish Bowmaster losing the ETB means it is sideboard tech against, you know, decks running the One Ring and whatnot, which is what honestly it should have been to begin with. And instead of just shadow banning all X1s in the format, you know, I saw a lot of people on Twitter being very excited that their Dragon Rage channelers are all of a sudden an option again, which whether or not that card is good, you can debate, feel free. But like when Bowmasters was around, it was straight up unplayable. And I mean,
the problem isn't that stuff. The problem is literally them taking months and months and months to finally nerf Crucius. And then it's like, what? It's a 3-1? Oh, wait, but there's Bowmasters now. Okay, that makes sense. Bowmasters can keep it in check. Wait, what? Now Bowmasters can't kill Crucius anymore and they just get to Crucius? And wait, but that was supposed to... The nerf on Crucius was because of Bowmasters keeping it out. So where are we now? It almost feels like one of those, you know, Australia, they bring in a certain pest by accident, it overproduces, and now they have to bring in another thing to eat the pest. But then now that predator is now overproduced, so they need to bring in another predator to eat that one. And it's like, oh my God. So I don't know where we're going to end up here. Yeah, these nerfs came right on the heels of this tournament, right? I mean, the One Ring and Bowmasters, despite the winning list being Is It Wizards, those other cards saw more play in that tournament than any other cards in the format. And then they immediately nerf both. Now, the One Ring nerf isn't quite as powerful. And again, we didn't mention it, but basically what they did was add an activated cost of 1 colorless to the tap ability, the activated ability on One Ring. So instead of just tapping, you have to pay 1 and tap. And that's annoying, but that's not the end of the world. The card's so powerful, it doesn't matter. But Bowmasters, that's a significant hit. And Bowmasters, again, was doing a great job keeping Crucius in check, which is a card that everybody complained about. So these people online who are like, oh, yes, finally, X1s are good again. Did you already forget that, like, we need to kill X1s, otherwise things like Crucius, even the nerfed version of Crucius is still going to be too good. So we'll see what happens with Historic, but as somebody who's, you know, avoided spending a lot of wildcards on Historic, this is one of the big reasons why. I mean, you don't get wildcards back when they do this kind of stuff, and I don't know if they should institute a program like that where, hey, even if we rebalance your card, we give you the wildcard back, because now the card is not what you crafted. Full stop. As soon as you cross that line, refund people. That's it, you know?
But, 100%. They should definitely change that policy to wildcards back for the ones, and same thing, if you want to recraft it to play those formats, then you can do that. That's your business. But I know a lot of folks that crafted Orcish Bowmasters because the card, I don't want to say it's unbeatable, but is silly.
It was the best in class for what it did.
Now they can't play with their silly card anymore, and they're out wild cards. And that matters. You spend real money on wild cards in Arena, right? Like whether that's opening packs or you can purchase the wild cards directly. What if you're that person that paid $20 for 4 rare wild cards and 4 mythic wild cards, and now all of a sudden your Orcish Bowmasters and One Rings don't do what they wanted to do, and you're out $20?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I tell people: don't play these formats because of exactly that.
If I were in that situation where I had literally spent that kind of money, I'm. You know, and I wasn't as entrenched as I am, let's be fair. But, you know, if I was a casual player and I had finally taken the step, made a purchase on Arena, like, okay, this is going to be my deck. It's in a non-rotating format. This is a safe investment. And then this happens. I'm uninstalling Arena and I'm going to go check out Legends of Runeterra again. I mean, like, that's... Honestly.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just, like, anyway, we've all faced this, but it's even more impactful than people realize. Like, I've heard people argue with me and say, well, it's just 4 wild cards. You know, you even if you're out 4 wild cards or whatever, or you know, even other formats, when they ban Fable or whatever in Standard, they give you the wild cards back. But if I just crafted Grixis midrange and I spent 20, 30 wild cards, I mean, just the mana base alone, you're talking almost 20 wild cards. And then now you ban the key cards in the deck. Yeah, you give me my 8 wild cards back, but I'm down 30 here. So it still feels bad. Never mind Historic, where you rebalance or whatever, a card, and it's not just a matter of refunding that one card. The whole deck, that is the backbone of a lot of these decks sometimes when they nerf these things, and then that's it. So it's a feel bad, and it's one of the reasons I say, try and not go too deep. I mean, if you're flush with wild cards and you don't care, then by all means have a deck in every format. But if you're trying to be, economically conscious and trying not to, spend too much money on Arena, then yeah, it's an issue. I think they need to re-examine that, because these nerfs and buffs, some of them seem so random. And for me, something rubs me the wrong way when a deck wins a big tournament with a bunch of buffed cards in it. Something is like, that you can't king make like that with Magic. It's almost like they just remember when Mythic Championship happened and it was Alchemy and the dungeon deck won, and they literally had 4 copies of the land that got a huge buff. It went from
it's completely
like 3
different
activation to 1, or it was a huge massive buff. And then it immediately wins the Pro Tour. It's like, oh god, when I heard that, I just thought, that's the worst look. The worst look.
Yeah. It was, that one was pretty rough. Well, I think in that case, it was interesting though, because there's a balance there, because the adventure, or the delve into the dungeon mechanic in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, they clearly overvalued it. Like they clearly thought it was just going to be stronger than it actually was. And the Dungeon Descent, the land, was like the best example of that, where it cost like 4 and you had to tap a legendary creature to venture into the dungeon once, and I think you could only do it as a sorcery. Did it enter tapped too? I feel like anyway, it was awful. It was I remember looking at that being like, this made it through QA. Like, somebody approved this. They thought this would see any play anywhere.
It's so bizarre.
And so that getting a buff makes sense. But you're right. The fact that it then moves on and becomes like potentially the best deck in the format. It's like
after
did they dial it back? Right. Maybe they went a little hard on that. Maybe
it's just not a good look. But it's funny, those dungeon things, and then you have Initiative, which is similar but absolutely broken and had to be banned in Pauper, had to be banned in Legacy, had to be banned in all these other formats. So it's very hard to how do you predict, is dungeon gonna be good? It fell flat on its face. Okay, then Initiative's probably fine. Whoops, it's breaking a bunch of old formats. Like, it's so hard to know. But anyway, so Historic Championship happened. It was interesting. I mean, God, there's like Luris, the blue-black control deck. That's the one I played last time in Historic. And then when somebody was like, here's the top 8, and I looked at the lists, it was exactly the same list I'd been playing months and months ago. Right down to the 1 Pithing Needle in the main, the 1, But Luris is illegal in Historic. Like, it was a wild tournament to see. Luris and Snapcaster and all this stuff. And I'm like, holy cow, that's still legal, right?
And now the 4 Orcish Bowmasters in that deck have been nerfed.
That's a big part of that. That's a huge blow to that deck. I mean, a lot of decks, even the Yawgmoth deck that you mentioned, that deck is almost a card-for-card copy of its Modern counterpart, which is a very powerful deck. One of the top decks in Modern, and it's missing Strangleroot Geist and like one other card. It's almost, if they wanted it to be identical, it's so close. That it's a very powerful deck, but in Modern it's going to continue to be powerful. But now in Historic with that Bowmaster nerf, I don't know, it's definitely taking it down a notch. But any other thoughts on Historic before we?
I also love just how Mono Green Devotion came in 4th. It was also made a good. Turns out, like, it's been a staple in Explorer for some time now, and Pioneer. Yeah, obviously. And this version looks shockingly similar. So sure enough.
Karn is a hell of a drug.
Yep.
And Nykthos, God.
Karn and Nykthos, what more do you need? Yep.
Yeah, anyway, Karn is the best Planeswalker in Modern. It's the best Planeswalker in Pioneer. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point it would be the best Planeswalker in Historic as well, and they would have to, maybe they nerf it or ban it or something, but it just keeps getting better and better and better every time they print more colorless cards. What's that, Carl?
I mean, Karn should have been banned in the last ban announcement, in my opinion. Okay. Hot take. Tell me in the comments below that I'm wrong. But yes, it should have been banned a while ago. And I know they're only making like emergency bans with upcoming ban announcement tomorrow. So after you would have heard this podcast. But if they ever needed to revisit something in any of the formats, get Karn out of Pioneer. Please. Thank you.
There are a few cards like that are floating around in formats like Modern and Pioneer that everybody knows. Everybody who knows anything about the game and the formats knows that eventually they must be banned. The delve cards are some of them in Pioneer and stuff like that, like Treasure Cruise and whatnot. Eventually, those cards are going to have to be banned. They are just too good. Every set that comes out, they end up getting better and better. Sleight of Hand being put into Pioneer just suddenly put the Phoenix deck back on the map after it's been basically dead in the water for I don't know how long now. Karn, I mean, the last Modern Pro Tour with 4-mana Karn, when the ramp deck Urzatron is not ramping 7-mana Karn into play, they're opting for 4 copies of the 4-mana card? Wow. That should tell you how insanely good that card is, and it just keeps getting better. That stuff, Plaza of Heroes, I would argue, is another card. Well, right now, people might go, what? And they'll scoff and say, come on, Plaza of Heroes. You're putting Plaza of Heroes in the same category as Karn and all this stuff? Yeah, it's the kind of card that will never stop getting better and better and better because they print so many legends in all the sets now. It's just going to get to the point where that land, it's coming to play untapped 5-color land that also protects your dudes. Like, that'll be a problem at some point. Maybe it's 2 years, 5 years down or whatever it is. So, like, there's cards like this in every format, and they kind of just quietly lurk under the surface. Sometimes they come up in a top deck. But as they become more and more pronounced, like Karn is a big one now. It's no secret how ridiculous they really need to shut it down.
And not to hamper the One Ring discussion, because this comes up every time. But like, hello, you gave us the One Ring after we already have Karn the Great Creator, like in Modern. So I can play 3 in my main and 1 in the sideboard and tutor it out and play a bunch of dumb stuff. On a card that I don't believe they will ever ban in that format, even though it's broken.
You don't think so?
No. No chance. Unless they really want to be like aggressive,
proactive. Yeah.
I don't think free spell should exist in Modern. Also, hot take.
Agreed.
But that is the prime example of how Karn gets better, set after set after set release. I don't think Tron would have been popular at that Pro Tour had we not had the One Ring that exists.
Because it was dead
and
before
it shuts your opponent's One Rings off. Like it's just an extra troll, Yeah. So get it out of here, please.
Yeah, at some point it's inevitable. It's got to go. But Historic's got a lot of cards that probably should go. Luris is the big one for me. I mean, that card's banned in almost every format, restricted in Vintage. Fine, in Historic, they were companion it.
Yeah. There was a legitimate talk from the mothership about banning Luris in Vintage before the companion buff. Because, you can restrict it all you want. I only wanted 1 anyway. It's fine. So until they nerfed companion, there was genuine talk about banning it in Vintage. That's how broken that card is. So,
so we'll see what happens in Historic. I don't know. It's there's not much to follow. There's the one tournament that happens every blue moon, and then that's it. There's no real data, so it'll continue to be a Wild West, I think, on Arena. But
so if you enjoy Historic, definitely take a look at some of these lists. I do think the Is It Wizards list is the real deal. None of the cards in that deck got impacted by the nerfings that came shortly after, but. And I think the Bowmaster nerf is going to be far more impactful than the One Ring nerf. Yeah, Damien, you referred to it as annoying. I think that's about right. You can't. It's going to cost you 3 mana or 4 mana throughout the course of the game to draw 1 million cards. Oh dang! Yeah. I think it's not going to be that big of a deal in the end. It'll slow it down a bit, which is fair, but. At the end of the day,
I like Blue-Red Wizards as well. If you're going to pick a safe deck, nothing in that deck's going to get nerfed unless you're referring to the card that got buffed. And then what do you call? Would it be an unbuff then? A debuff? Because they buffed it. What if they put it back? Like, is that a nerf? It's not really a nerf.
Is that a reset? I don't know. Yeah.
My point is, you don't have to worry too much.
Do I get my wild cards back?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and Damien, when we were doing commentary earlier, you made a really great point about Magic specifically, and Symmetry Sage being a really cool example of it from a game development perspective. And I love how you compared it to League of Legends, because when a character is dealing 1,500 damage in an attack, you can knock that down to 1,300 or 1250 or whatever. You can fine tune that dial. You really can nail it into a point where it is on par with what else is going on. Well, in Magic, Symmetry Sage was an 0-2 that could become a 2-2. In paper, and it changed to an 0-3 that could become a 3-3. The 2-2 variant is unplayable trash that is collecting dust in bargain bins. The 3-3 variant just won the Arena Championship.
I know.
So
yeah, I like to think of it as
wild.
the dial. The dial for Magic has 5 settings, or every time you turn that dial, it's a big jump. Even though it might not seem like a big number difference on the card, the mana cost going from 3 to 4, or they activated a bit, going from 1 to 2, or 0 to 1, like the ring. It is a big difference in Magic where the dials don't have a million little degrees of adjustment that you can make. So. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm not a fan of a lot of the nerfs and buffs. It erodes, player confidence, like we alluded or we were talking about earlier, and just I don't think it's good for the game. I think the less of that, the better. But it seems like Arena doesn't get those digital only cards don't get the same time and attention that the real cards do. They have a much smaller team. They don't have a giant R&D department working on these sets and things. So I think that's partially why it took so long to nerf Crucius and other stuff. So I don't know what the future is of Alchemy and Historic. Wizards has clearly signaled they don't want it to die, but I know most of the community that I speak to doesn't care if it dies tomorrow. They would not lose any sleep. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But
the only thing, and sort of the last thing, I guess I'll comment on Alchemy, Historic in general. I believe when Wizards posted the data, right, it was Alchemy was the lowest played format, and that was before rotation, because remember Alchemy rotated even though Standard didn't, which caused Bowmasters, One Ring, Lord of the Rings deck to take over the format, because that set is just so overpowered in comparison to what you have in Standard. So I think adding the Lord of the Rings sets to Alchemy just didn't make any sense. I understand they want people to play the cards more, but that doesn't compare to the cards that are in Dominaria United. Like there's no equivalent there. And so I was like partially excited, thinking maybe more people would play Alchemy after rotation to figure out what would be Standard if Standard had rotated plus some Alchemy cards. Yeah. But the Lord of the Rings set doesn't allow for that to happen. So I think it's just going to cause people to play the format less.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's their digital only format. I don't think Wizards is going to have any plan on abandoning it either. However, I would think and hope that one day they decide to take the Alchemy cards out of Historic and let Historic be what the older Magic cards would be when they interacted with each other. No buffs, no nerfs. Just take all the digital only aspects out of Historic. It doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that.
That was a big blow. A lot of people. That was the decision that literally made tons of people just go, well, that's it. Forget it. I'm done with it. I'm done with Historic. I'm out. That's it. Like they just straight up stopped playing Historic after that decision. I agree with you. They need to fix that. Alchemy is its own mutated beast now as well. It was supposed to be Standard, right? But then they threw Lord of the Rings. So what is Alchemy now? I don't even know. I think Historic has more of an identity than Alchemy. Like Historic is the big sandbox legacy style format where everything's legal. Alchemy is what exactly? It's definitely not Standard anymore.
We have Alchemy Wilds of Eldraine that just released this last week, and the most excitement that I've seen from that set is people being able to play the Three Little Pigs, and they're not even playable. They're not even really playable in that format. People just like building.
Who cares?
Meme decks with them, I guess, like 1 piggy, 2 piggy, 3, and it's fine.
Yeah, my whole brand is pigs. My logo is a pig holding a Colossus hammer. Like it's everything I do is pig related. And they gave me playable
I eat nothing but pork.
They finally gave me, because I've been trying to make boars work for a long time. Like I've tried to make boar commander decks and things. They're terrible. Tribal. Yeah, you can't do it. You just can't do it. Well, and part of the problem is, and right now, I thought, oh, cool, we have the Three Little Pigs now. So at the very least, maybe I can build like a pig-themed Historic Brawl deck. It's just kind of fun, memey to play with against viewers, sure, whatever. And I did, but here's the problem. With boars, these new boars and all the cards that interact with them are all Abzan. Okay, that's fine, but we have Ilharg on the client, and I'm not making a board deck and not including Ilharg. You can't make me. It is what it is, right? So
it's
the color
weird.
identity.
I think it's just weird that they go, here's a modern Masters set, essentially. Here's Lord of the Rings, and then the next set is Wild of Eldraine. and everybody's like, wait, but like this isn't even in the same league power wise. Nobody who cares what Wild and Eldraine. Does even one of these cards matter in this format? Probably not, because the last set was so huge. You know, everything that came before it and after it, unless it's another modern Masters level set, is now kind of, you know, subpar. We'll see.
But interestingly enough, they have confirmed that Modern Horizons 3 is going to be coming to Arena. And I don't believe that's going to be coming to Alchemy. I don't recall if they've confirmed that or not.
Who knows?
But
it's not?
Oh, I don't believe so. Yeah, I believe it's going to be draftable and playable in Historic.
Oh, okay.
And so it sounds to me like they're really trying to make Historic, at the very least, modern, playable, or like you're saying, even comparable to Legacy. It feels like they're trying to give Historic that feel. I don't know, but in my opinion, if you're going to do that, you got to start unbanning some stuff. Like unban Ragavan, unban Lightning Bolt. YOLO, let's do this thing. Do I want Memory Lapse?
Unban Spreading Seas.
Yeah, unban Spreading Seas. Exactly. Oh, yeah, Brainstorm.
Anyway, there's crazy stuff that's legal. Brainstorm is legal. Memory Lapse, like Historic's a gong show. I don't even know what's going on in that format. It's crazy, which is fun, and a lot of people like that, right? They like the chaos. They like being able to go from I play against Cat Oven, and next match I'm playing against Belcher. Like, whoa, what? Or like Tainted Pact combo, or some crazy it's kind of cool. Luris or whatever.
And having some place where you can do that is fun. And like, why not Historic? You know, so okay, sure. Well, and like they did a No Limits midweek event recently, where they did where I think your decks could contain it wasn't any number, but it was a no ban list. They did a no ban list Historic.
But more importantly, they made it free. Everybody could play whatever cards. They didn't make you craft it. That is something they need to do more. I was saying this when that was happening. They do this on Magic Online now, which is fantastic since that other company took over the management of Magic Online. They've been doing that
Daybreak.
More and more.
Yep.
Daybreak, thank you. And man, that is huge. That is absolutely and it costs them nothing. Just do it for a week. Every time a new set comes out, they should do that. Man, they would sell so many more packs.
Oh my god! Let people fall in love with their deck, and then when the week is over, it's like, well, if you want to craft it, you gotta buy some packs. Exactly. Yeah. That would be huge.
We'll see. Maybe they wake up someday. But all right. Well, let's move on. That's enough Historic talk, I think, unless you guys want to say anything else. But
I mean, honestly, that covers the bases. I think it's kind of fun. I don't know. It's funny talking about Historic and Alchemy because I do worry that we're just falling into the same echo chamber as so many other competitive Magic players. But we just look at this and go, I don't know, but why? Like, why is this a thing? And it's fair, it's a legit question, but I don't know.
It's an echo chamber in a way. Like I hear people, argue against that and say, it's a good format in this. And I don't just say, you're wrong. I want to say, okay, well, why? Like, what do you like about it? Why is it attractive? What do you like about the game? Like, and I'm sure there's good games happening. You can still have fun playing the format. Magic's a fun game. So even if I'm playing a bad format, the basement is very high here. The floor, I mean, it's, you're still getting to play Magic. So it's going to be fun, but that does not make a good format because, you have fun games once in a while.
And I think it's tough because Wizards has limited resources, right? I'm not in the building. I don't know exactly what that means, like as far as their budgets or their, the development assets they have. But at the end of the day, if you're going to make a format like Alchemy and like Historic successful doing these digital rebalances, those rebalances need to happen frequently. And there needs to be some way, and the cost of entry needs to be cheaper. And you need to be able to refund, when changes are made so you can pivot into other decks. All of that stuff needs to exist, and that system just isn't in place right now. We see so few changes. If we saw an Alchemy buff and, or nerf happen every single week, then I would have a lot more faith that someone is watching that format and crafting a fun gameplay experience. And we just don't have that. And then I can appreciate that, okay, maybe that's not for me because I want my experience to translate to paper, but that's a cool sandbox where a lot of neat things are happening. Man, y'all have some fun. I bet that's going to be, and maybe I'll stop in every now and then to see what's going on and try a few things out. But as it stands, I have zero confidence in that. Like, it's funny, I express frustration sometimes about Standard when things feel stale. And it's like, I just want to try to craft some other decks. And all the removal and the current best threats are just holding it down. I can't really break out of it. And I've had people say, like, well, have you tried brewing in Alchemy? And I was like, oh man, on paper, that should so solve this problem.
Yeah.
But in reality, just no.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. We'll see what happens. But it kind of reminds me of the beginning of Pioneer. I don't know if you guys played Pioneer when it first came out, but they banned things every single week, right? They straight up said right at the beginning, every week, we're going to ban stuff. We're going to slowly, figure it until we figure this format out, because we're crafting it from scratch here. Yep. And did people complain? No. I mean, you heard one or two people say, oh, this is ridiculous and blah, blah, blah. Most players were fine with it. Nobody was saying, hey, don't go buy the best deck. At that time, it was like mono black aggro. It was like, don't go buy mono black aggro, because they literally said they're going to ban stuff every week. I'm pretty sure whatever the top deck is, it's going to take some hits. So, and people just knew that. As long as they communicate clearly, listen, this is the path we're going to take with Alchemy. This is what we're going to do with Historic. This is where these formats are headed, so that you know what's coming. We're going to announce bannings or nerfs come out this time, that time, whatever. Just saying that would go so far in terms of helping players to understand whether or not they want to get involved in a format like that. Is that the kind of format I want to get into now that I know what's coming and where this is headed and what it's supposed to be? At least players know, but they don't say anything. So people are like, oh, this seems fun. They jump in and they're shocked when crazy stuff happens, like their cards don't do the same things as they do in paper anymore. And now, they have to kind of make a more official kind of policy for all this stuff, but it's just, there's a lot of moving parts, so I don't know. Who knows why not? Anyway, I don't want to keep bashing Wizards all day. Hopefully they figure it out, but so there's Eldraine Alchemy releases as well coming out, which we don't know anything about yet, right?
Just the pigs.
Oh no, that's the pigs. The pigs. We got pigs. Yep.
The pigs are coming.
Pigs are coming. Yep. Well, pigs are here. They're on the client. And it's funny, when I was filling, so a little peek behind the curtain for listeners out there, when I was filling out our little document, our little itinerary for the day, I literally titled this Eldraine Alchemy Releases with the only subject, should we care?
Show notes.
Our show notes, if you will. And the reality is, honestly, probably not. I don't think it's going to impact anything. They do make Eldraine Alchemy draftable, so it's just Wilds of Eldraine draft with these alchemy cards inserted, and that I can imagine being an interesting dynamic. I know I talked to some limited players who played the alchemy version of AFR, whatever that was called. It had some ridiculously long name when it came out. I did it a little bit, and I was like, it's not for me. But if you're a limited only content creator, things get stale quickly sometimes. I mean, unless the set is really good, sometimes by the end of it, you're just like, if that's, that's what you do, is just draft. So this is kind of nice. At least those players get something different. But the last time that it came around, people were pretty happy with it. They were like, oh yeah, this is a cool take. They kind of fixed, they did some interesting stuff with some of the cards and balanced things or whatever. And people were generally pretty happy with it. So as much as we bash the constructed side, I think from what I hear, the alchemy limited stuff is pretty good. I don't know. Did you guys dabble in that before?
I've played a couple of the alchemy drafts, and tried to be the person who only takes the alchemy cards to see how they are different from what's in the set. I think that the card I've played all the time, it's like some 3-mana red card, and it's like players can't gain life, and then it spits out food fight tokens for you.
Yes.
Or generates food tokens.
I don't remember.
I think it's called Overcharged or something like this.
Okay.
I'm not sure the name. I don't know any of the alchemy name cards, but it's literally 3 mana enchantment. If it has celebration, so if 2 non-land permanents, thank you. There you go. Enter the battlefield this turn. Instead, you create a food fight instead of a food token at the beginning of your end step. And it's glorious. This card is
a mythic. Yeah, yes. That's why I've never seen this before. I love the game Overcooked, but and Overcooked 2. This is interesting.
So it's pretty sweet. I've drafted this probably in every deck that I've played of Alchemy Draft because nobody takes it. And there's no way. Making food fight tokens have to be great.
Well, and Food Fight is such a wonderful design to put in a conjure context where you can create way more than 4 of them, because Food Fight cares about the number of cards, permanents you have named Food Fight. And so if you can make copies of it, stuff can get very silly very fast. And so being able to conjure multiples of them, that's fun. I like that.
Yeah, sure. The flavorful ones, yeah, they're cool. I mean, yeah. So a lot of them weren't just new cards. They also like tweaked some existing cards. They rebalanced a bunch of the cards in that limited set the last time around, right? For the Baldur's Gate one. I thought they did anyway.
I believe they did. I believe it. I know in the past they have done that, and it was funny. I know they did it with AFR. I believe they did it with Baldur's Gate, and I think the reception on that was actually kind of mixed. I think they got a little bit of heat for it. I know I listened to a couple of limited podcasts, even though I don't play as much limited as I would like. And a lot of people said they found it very frustrating because the cards weren't quite what they remembered. You know, and there were a number of cards.
Yeah, it's weird.
And I think AFR was where they first tried it. If I'm remembering correctly, it was one of the D&D sets. And Blue had been, or no, it was Baldur's Gate. Now that you mention it, Blue had been like unplayable. It was like terrible in the base set, if I recall correctly, in draft. And they buffed it significantly. And all of a sudden, people who were familiar with the previous draft environment would jump into the Alchemy draft environment, and there were literally just like the cards that they thought they knew they didn't know anymore. And even though the environment was probably more dynamic and the drafts were more fun for the people who had been paying attention and could keep track of everything, for the more casual players, apparently that was very jarring. And, you know, so, okay, that's interesting. That. Yeah. But you're right. For people who are entrenched, I'm sure it was great. And I heard a lot of good things because all of a sudden, this unplayable archetype is now balanced. And we've all seen that with, you know, when draft sets get stale, it's usually because one or two of the archetypes just cannot hang with the other ones. And as a result, nobody goes for them whatsoever.
Yeah.
And the depth that you see in gameplay and the cards that are available that are actually decent and give you a chance to win, it's just a smaller pool you're drawing from. And so...
I mean, it is a great kind of system. It would be awesome if they could release a draft format and go, oh crap, you know, this mechanic totally fell flat, or this color is way weaker than all the other colors based on the data we have. Let's buff it. Let's rebalance. Let's just not completely warp it, but let's just rebalance a few things and make it, you know, a little bit better. And it makes for a better draft format. I think in Limited, despite all the bashing we make of, you know, rebalances in Constructed, which can nerf your entire deck, in Limited, it's actually a positive thing. I think it would be cool to see them do that after every single set on Arena and just have, here's the Wilds of Eldraine set, and that's on for a few weeks, and then at the end of it, or maybe when they bring it back or whatever, it's Eldraine remastered or whatever, and they make it better. Because I know even Wilds of Eldraine, like blue-white fell flat, like there's, you know, a couple colors that are considered weaker, the blue-white, you know, tap their stuff, whatever, draw cards, is just unplayable. And so it would be cool to see that mechanic be good or better and have it kind of be the way they originally intended, you know? So it's kind of interesting, but that, you know, these nerfs and rebalancing, it doesn't apply the same to Limited as Constructed. But I think in Limited it's a good thing maybe, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it could be.
So should we talk about a real format? How about Standard?
Hi.
Indeed.
All right,
I'd love to chat about Standard. Yes, let's go.
We had our World Championships. We all knew going in, there wasn't a lot of data from the Standard environment. We had, you know, the Modern Pro Tour, and then we had the Pioneer RCQ season happening at the same time into the Modern RCQ season. So nobody's really given a crap about Standard, really. I mean, there's no big tournament, so there's no reason to care. Until suddenly, the World Championships jammed right in the middle of Pioneer and Modern RCQ seasons. So Worlds happened, and everybody kind of thought, okay, this is going to dictate the metagame going forward. So just to recap, before we go into the Worlds, Blue-Black Tempo was really popular. The week right before Worlds, they were starting to branch into Esper. You were starting to see the Blue-Black decks pick up White and stuff. Green-Black was kind of just arriving on the scene. Wilds had just dropped, so people weren't sure if it was good enough yet and everything. The 5-color ramp deck was still one of the strongest decks. Didn't really need to pick up much, but they end up getting up the Beanstalk, a little tool that actually helped them out a little bit. But so now Worlds happens. Now we're post-Worlds. What do you guys think of the metagame now? Has it evolved from Worlds? Are the decks still pretty much the same? What are you thinking? What are you seeing?
I mean, I personally would say that the metagame has evolved since Worlds. I think the metagame is still very diverse, whether you are checking out Magic Arena or you're checking out Magic the Gathering Online. The results are very varied. And, you know, taking a look at HollywoodPizza's Standard tournaments, definitely the results are varied. submissions all across the place. I think the first standard tournament post Worlds on Hollywood Pizza's tournament was 50% metagame, 50% non-metagame.
Yeah.
And
I love seeing those other slices.
I am happy to see other, and we're not just talking about people that put fake deck names on Melee. But it's been very interesting to see, you know, and as we're talking and recording this podcast, y'all, the finals or quarterfinals
semifinals right now.
The current Pizza Box Open is happening now, and we can see what's in their top 8, and it's 8 different decks. Granted, 2 of them might be ramp decks, plus the control deck has some elements of the ramp deck in it, but they are all different decks, and it's great to see. I have never been more excited for Standard in a long time than I am now. From just games playing on the ladder, hey, we just had the best of 1 qualifier yesterday, and where you think you would see all mono red, it wasn't all mono red. Which speaks to me maybe a healthy best of 1 format too. But for us folks who play best of 3, checking out Pizza Box Tournament, checking out the Magic Online challenges, the leagues, what decks are 5-0ing over there. To me, Standard is healthy. Yes, we have like some cards people don't really like to deal with, which are Shieldred, which is 100% killable. Atraxa, which is ridiculous of a Magic card. But even considering those 2, and considering, again, as of this recording, there's a ban announcement tomorrow that is likely not going to have any bans on it. I don't think Standard needs any bans. I think we're in a very healthy format. I don't know. How y'all feel?
Ham, what do you think?
I'm right there with you. I don't believe here's the thing. I'm going to express my opinion, which I believe is shared by a large portion of this community, but I'm going to articulate it in a way you don't often hear. I don't believe the health of this format requires any bans at this time. I wish they had rotated. That's it. That's all it is. I would have preferred a rotation.
Ban Kamigawa.
I would love to be able to attack into 4 open mana, but you just can't right now. And but that's just a personal preference. And at the end of the day, Wandering Emperor does not make up an unpleasant or an unreasonable share of the metagame. Same is true with Shieldred. The thing about Shieldred is once she sticks, you need to end her in like a turn or 2, or the game is not going your way. She's an incredibly powerful card. Did they push the knobs on her a little hard? Yeah. Like, she didn't need to have 5 toughness, in my opinion, but she does.
She didn't need her knobs pushed.
Yeah, exactly. They pushed the knobs a little hard. I mean, maybe she likes having that. Anyway, but
I don't want to shame.
Hey, no, I'm not. No shame, no judgment. But but in any event, But that's a scenario where is it unhealthy to have a card that is incredibly strong and impactful in the game? Like, I don't know.
So
yeah,
I agree with you guys almost completely. I think there's a small, again, and this is just me playing devil's advocate. I agree that there's no Hogaks, there's no Okos, there's no this card needs to be banned now, this is a problem kind of card. However, I find this is not a perfect Standard. It's a very good Standard. I think Standard right now is better than a lot of other formats. I think it's really quite good, but there is a large aspect of the metagame that I feel is still mostly missing, and that's aggro. I know we have blue-white soldiers and maybe a little bit of white aggro, but it doesn't put up much results. They end up sneaking 1 copy or maybe 2. After the World Championship, I really saw a big shift. Now blue-white looks a lot better. The Simon Nielsen version that's avoiding, just forget about soldiers. Let's just do convoke stuff. Really, way more versatile and kind of, able to adapt and everything, a much better deck. But where's mono red? I'm looking at the numbers here. If you go to MTG Top 8, it says the last 2 months of competitive Magic play from all these different tournaments and challenges on MTGO and stuff. Mono red makes up the 3rd most played deck. It's Esper decks at 13%, the ramp decks at 12, and then it's mono red. And I'm like, wow, that is crazy. Or 14, 13, 12%. Mono red seeing a lot of play and putting up almost no results. And I feel like it's all mid-range, and it's not as bad as it was before the bannings and stuff that happened in Standard, but I still feel like aggro is underrepresented. That is the one weak aspect of Standard right now. I wish aggro was a little bit better, or at least, had to be taken seriously, and these ramp decks and other decks that are just doing really greedy stuff would have to take that, into consideration. But the reality is, you know, cards like Sholdred make red or aggro-based strategies pretty tough to play. And I know there are cards that kill Sholdred in red, but they're not good. They're not cards red wants to play naturally. They're having to bend over backwards to play, you know, Rebel Salvo and these stuff back in the day. Or, you know, burn spells that don't go to the face, whether it's Obliterating Bolt or that new Witch Stalker's Frenzy.
Witch Stalker Frenzy, yeah.
If your burn spells don't go to the face, you don't want to be playing it in mono red. That's a concession to cards that you just can't beat. You would otherwise not play this card, right? So, I don't know. I think I don't want to see bans, but for the health of the standard format, I mean, there's an argument for banning Sholdred. I think that's the one card that it's not too good. It dies to everything, I know, and it's very easy to deal with for a lot of decks, but it does single-handedly affect an entire facet of the metagame, and in a bad way, kind of suppressing it. And I just wonder, if there was no Sholdred, what the format would look like. I think it would look quite a bit different. But anyway, I agree with you guys. I don't think it needs to be banned. It would just be an interesting kind of ban. It's my one tiny little caveat there. But for the most part, I think you're right. I mean, and it's an $80 card in standard right now, and banning it would piss off a lot of people.
Oh my goodness.
I know why they wouldn't, but
that's a fair point. But I also wonder if they were to ban Rafine, and as a result, Cut Down became less popular, would that open up a window for mono red?
Oh, I don't know.
It's kind of a thought experiment. Maybe it's a little bit of a reach, but anyway.
This, you know, I think the mono red decks that exist now on the ladder, let's say, because that's what I see it the most. I don't really see it in best of 3 for the reason that Damien just talked about. But the ones that are on the ladder in best of 3 that are doing the best are those that are playing Charming Scoundrel and Godric instead of Squeak.
Oh, yeah.
Because Godric flies over the top and doesn't give a damn about Shieldred, right? And it's playing cards like Monstrous Rage, which is getting your small creatures out of the range of Cut Down, right? If you go to cut down my 1/2 Monastery Swift Spear and I slam a Monstrous Rage on it, that thing is now 4/5 and it doesn't get cut down and it has Trample. You know, so it gets a little bit ahead of the curve. I love Monstrous Rage. That card is great, by the way.
Very strong trick. Yeah,
but absolutely. You know, and I understand the sentiment on not seeing a lot of aggro. I try to bring this back to how Standard used to be years ago, like when you were tournament grinding, right? And you were going from Star City was in Chicago to Philly to here, and you went every 2 weeks to like a new tournament, plus GPs, all in that mix, right? So there was a defined metagame. You could follow it week to week, and there was always rock, paper, scissors in Standard, if you remember what I'm talking about, right? You always had 3 best decks, rock, paper, scissors. You had one could beat the other, maybe couldn't hedge on all, you know, the other 2. But you had to come up to decide which one you were going to play. Concentrated format, you had more then. And I think the rock, paper, scissors now has changed where you don't have 3 best decks in a format, but you have the ramp decks that envelop 1, the control / mid-range decks in 2, and your aggro decks in 3. So even though the aggro decks might not be that prevalent because mid-range is too strong, maybe that's how, you know, how Damien brings up, you need for the health of that rock, paper, scissors of a standard format, try to nerf one of those to make aggro more prevalent. So I totally understand that argument. And I think that's how Standard is going to be really going forward, right? Is those 3 mixtures of decks. But also at the same time, I think we're going to eventually deal with a problematic card. And you can kind of see it now in Up the Beanstalk. And I'm talking about a card that is being not necessarily problematic in Standard, but it is allowing that domain deck to be able to cast a Leyline Binding for 1 mana to exile an effect and draw a card. And that card only costs 2 mana to put on the battlefield, and you're not wasting your destroy target enchantment most of the time on Up the Beanstalk because you need it for Leyline Binding.
No, and I talked about this today. Up the Beanstalk, one of the most annoying parts about that card, you know, I'm playing control, I'm playing mid-range, it doesn't matter what I'm playing. I see that Beanstalk on the other side, and I'm like, I can spend a card to kill this, but they already got a card off it, so I'm going to be down a card. Every card I spend to kill this costs more than 2, so I'm down on mana and down a card. Should I just leave this thing in play? Like, do I have to kill this thing that already drew them a card and I'm down a card just to get it off the battlefield for their future things? Like, it's super annoying. But what if they banned Leyline Binding? Leyline Binding is the glue that is making Up the Beanstalk better. That is making Up the Beanstalk a real card, to be honest. And Shark. The Shark not having access to an instant speed 6/6 and drawing you a card off the Beanstalk, just the Leyline Binding is what's making those other 2 cards so busted in that deck. I don't know. Do you think they ban Binding? Well, that 5-color deck would fall apart.
100%, because the other thing that Leyline Binding gives, that 5-color deck is capable of having 1 mana removal that can hit absolutely anything available on turn 2. Like, the downside of loading your deck full of tri-lands like that is supposed to be that your first couple of turns are slow. That's just not the case if you get the right tri-lands in your hand at the beginning.
And remember, if Standard had rotated it as normal, those tri-lands would be out of the format, and Leyline Binding would not be as much of an issue.
Would be not a non-factor completely, but it would be much better in older formats where they're legal, and it wouldn't be a factor in Standard.
The rotation is causing all kinds of issues. There's no point. Like, we can't even, there's nothing we can do about that. But I mean, that deck. I mean, Seed Shark is a super powerful card, but when you're getting like 4/4 tokens off your 4-mana play, or a 5/5 token off your Sunfall or whatever, that's fine. When you're getting a 6/6 for 1 mana, that's not fine.
But
and
even
at
the
instant speed,
even your Sunfall example, I cast Sunfall, I exile the board, I get a token, and I draw a card for each Up the Beanstalk I have on the battlefield.
Okay, so Up the Beanstalk's the other thing. So Seed Shark would be better. Up the Beanstalk, though, I mean, it is a slow card. When you have to play things that cost 5 or more, you shouldn't be able to draw a bunch of cards in the early game with that Up the Beanstalk. Right. But with Leyline, you're drawing like cards immediately off it. That's not how that card was supposed to be, you know.
Exactly. It's easily abused. Like, just looking at it on paper. Yeah, the Up the Beanstalk, just on paper, Up the Beanstalk should be fine. It really should be.
Seed Shark. But Leyline is breaking those 2 cards. Leyline is making those 2 cards busted. And I wonder what would happen if they just ban Leyline. That would be very interesting. I still think there would be Atraxa ramp decks, but they would definitely have to be rebuilt, because that you take away Leyline, they lose access to their main removal. I don't know what they're doing after that. They're maybe angling into black to play more, go for the throats, whatever. It would be interesting. I think it would be a good thing, and they should do it. So maybe it's Leyline instead of Sheoldred. I don't know. Something like that could be.
I would love, honestly, I would love to see how the format adjusts with any of these hits. I would love to see Standard get shaken up a little bit, but at the same time, I do think there's enough interplay. I do think there's enough checks and balances that I don't know if it's and
Standard's still good. We're complaining here.
Yeah, exactly.
It is good.
We're it's one of those things where we're taking a bite of something that we made, and we're like, I'm enjoying it. It's nice. It's just missing that little something to really push it over the edge. It's like, it could be perfect if we just find the right.
Taste like grandma's.
Exactly. It's not quite grandma's, but we're
But we're getting there soon.
We're getting there.
And again, we're in a very weird transitional period right now where, yes, rotation should have happened. It didn't. I think when rotation finally does happen at the end of the next year, we're going to be like kind of back on track. And then we can accurately kind of criticize, okay, now we really should look at what should be banned, what should not be, blah, blah, blah. But right now it's a weird time, and you know what? It makes for an interesting Standard, whether you love it or hate it. I think there is, like you said, Carlo, there's a lot of viable decks, and I think no matter what style of Magic you like to play, other than maybe aggro, but even aggro, you can play blue-white or whatever, mono-white.
No.
Or even mono-red. I mean, I'm not saying that it's unplayable. I'm just, when you're talking about the metagame, tier 1, tier 2, etc., mono-red is not tier 1. And I don't even think blue-white almost feels like a mid-range deck. It's the most aggressive of the top decks, but it's not aggro. So it'll be interesting to see what...
I think there's a sleeper aggro deck out there that nobody's playing, and that's the red-green aggro deck that actually plays Picnic Ruiner. That can kill you on turn 4. That deck can. It's much faster than mono red, and it gets to take advantage of like that monstrous rage card and playing cards like Audacity, which, hey, you kill my creature and I get to draw a card to replace it, which doesn't traditionally happen with mono red. So for those of you at home that don't know Picnic Ruiner, it can just be a 2/2 for 2. That says when it attacks, if you got a guy with power 4 or greater, it gets double strike to end of turn. Or hey, it could be a 4 mana, distribute 3+1/+1 counters on any number of target creatures you control. So it will create a 4/4 at minimum for that sorcery speed. But you get to take advantage of cards like the Charming Scoundrel and Godric, which if you play two things, Godric's a 4/4 flyer, then this thing is a double striker with all the buffs on it. So, you know, the deck does have a hard time against removal, obviously. Yeah. But I think it's very fast, and this is an aggro deck that folks should be taking a look at.
Yeah. Well, the other interesting thing with with Picnic Ruiner specifically, it says when you control a creature, it doesn't say other. Right. And so if you trigger Monstrous Rage before you attack, or put Audacity on it before you attack, it sees itself, and all of a sudden it's double striking. Right away. Like when it's attacking on turn 3 potentially. Like
cut down, go for the throat. You know, Esper Raffine being one of the best decks just means people are playing more cut down than in the last few months. And it's, you know, a deck that relies on playing creatures that die to cut down or go for the throat kills everything, but cut down in particular. At least this guy's 2 mana, it's not too bad. Like losing your 3-drop, or like that's why Helena and Elena don't see play, like you mentioned, Ham, or like you know, there's so many cards. Adeline is just seeing record low numbers of play right now, when it used to be one of the best cards in Standard. Because when cut down's everywhere and you're trading your 3 mana card for a 1 mana card, it feels terrible. I'd rather play a 3 mana card like Skitter, Lord Skitter, or Gix, or something that does not die to cut down. So this deck, it's aggressive and can probably kill out of nowhere, but it's tough to be aggro. The removal is really good right now in Standard, and Black's still one of the most commonly played colors. So it's got to be tough just slogging through it all with a deck that's built around, you know, going off with creatures. I mean, hell, we have an infinite mana combo deck in Standard right now. There's a deck that's capable of going infinite, making infinite mana, and burning you for infinite, but it is not a tier 1 deck, and that sounds weird, but then you remember... It's a creature-based combo deck, so the whole combo falls apart as soon as they kill your dude with the counter on it, or kill, you know, your fairy, or whatever it is, Kami, whatever it is they're going off with. This Soul Cauldron deck is, of course, what I'm referring to. But yeah, the fact that Soul Cauldron's great, and if it was just built around Soul Cauldron, 100%. It would be a great deck. Artifact, much harder to deal with, but it needs a creature in play, and to be able to activate a bunch and your opponent not kill it at any point. That's a big ask, and there's a reason this deck's nowhere near tier 1, despite doing something very broken.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's tough. Yeah, it's tough to be a creature-based deck. And with the removal being so good, those other decks can go way over the top. I think Esper midrange is really interesting. Like, Esper occupies one spot when we talk about these top decks, but really you can split it into 3 different decks. There's the Esper Legends deck playing 26 creatures or whatever, where you're going Skrelv into Thalia, into Raffine, or into Sholdred, and that's very busted. We know Plaza of Heroes, one of the best cards in Standard. If you can make it work, it's ridiculous. You get to play 6 channel lands, 7. It feels like you're playing a 20 land deck with like 40 spells. It's crazy. So Esper Legends very powerful. Then Esper Control on the other end of the spectrum saw 0 play. I was jamming it before the bannings, and not, you know, it was okay, but then the bannings happened. Suddenly Esper Control's viable. I don't know if it's the best. I think it's probably the weakest of the 3 Esper decks, but and then the mid-range deck, which basically was blue-black tempo, and they kind of just evolved. They have some of the aspects of the Raffine decks with Denick and Raffine, but then instead of playing Thalia and Skrelv and all this stuff, they're using, you know, 4 Make Disappear, 4 Go for the Throat, Wedding Announcements, just hard to interact with threats, reactive stuff that they can go, Denick, Raffine, leave up Make Disappear, go. You're never winning this game. I'm just going to keep finding more Make Disappears off this Raffine, and with Plaza in play, like, that's it. You're just done now, right? So 3 very distinct versions of Esper, and they're all quite good. I think the Esper mid-range deck that Kozune Kosaka top 8'd the World Championship with has become the template for, I think, the best version of that deck.
I agree.
The tempo version. So yeah, a lot of diversity. And when people try to, it's all just Esper ramp and one other thing. It's like, but break that down a little bit, and you'll see there's a lot of decks there. Green-black being the other kind of pillar up there. Now, I've hesitated to call Green-black a tier 1 deck, but I think it is a tier 1 deck. I will give it that. I think it's earned it. But it is still a rough matchup against 5-color, and then, I don't know, it's got this grindy aspect that I think it's good against the control decks. A lot of people tell me it's a bad matchup for Esper Control, but I haven't found that to be the case. But it is definitely grindy, and all those creature lands are a pain in the butt to deal with. So, have you guys, what do you think? Is Green-black a pillar of this tier 1 deck in this format right now?
I think it is. I'm glad that deck was finally able to allow like Glissa Sunslayer to have a home. Yeah, that card is fantastic. Yes, that card alone shuts down aggro decks. You cannot attack through that Glissa. You know, and the plus side of that being able to combat the ramp decks from the destroy and enchantment aspect of it, right? So you can blow up Leyline Binding, you can blow up the Beanstalk, somebody's Virtue that might be on the battlefield, Wedding Announcement. It checks all those boxes. Card is great. Of course, you know, and it avoids cut down, which is also huge because it's absolutely. So this is a premium creature in my opinion.
Oh, 100%. And she always has been. Like you're saying, she does absolutely everything. Just putting green in your deck.
Cast.
That was it was never worth it until now. Yeah.
And you know, the Golgari deck is a deck that you can play tap land on 1, draw a card, lose a life turn 2, have a delayed creature later, so you are always +1 that 1 card. Glissa into Shieldred, which is already powerful. Hey, you can play 5 mana Shieldred if you really, really want. But you get to play lots of value cards. Lord Skitter, great card. Being able to eat the graveyard, give you some 1/1s. Being able to play, you know, cards like Blossoming Tortoise, which is going to make your 4/4 land now a 5/5 land.
And bring it back
it does ramp
when it dies.
Right? Yeah, like you mill 3, it can ramp you to 6 on the next turn, which is relevant in that deck because it plays Virtue of Persistence, and that costs 7 mana to play that side of it. Right. So all of those cards in that deck in particular meld really well together. Awesome removal, awesome creatures. Obviously, it's weak to sleepers, and Standard has infinite sweepers in the format, whether that's Depopulate, Sunfall, Farewell, Brother's Hood End, if people are still playing that card, Path to Peril. You know, there are tons of sweepers. So obviously, it's weak. So you just got to know how to play the deck correctly, play it tight so you don't get wrecked by sweepers. But the ramp tech can go over top of Golgari. So there's a check on it, right? The ramp decks, once you establish the ability to lay line binding the right targets, attracts it into infinite cards, Golgari's game plan folds. So, you know, it's a great deck. I love to play the deck. I love to see it played. But it's also fair. Like, so
very fair
tier
deck,
1. Imagine that.
Well,
you know,
it's not aggressive enough to go under and be a really proactive, you know, aggro deck. It's not late. The late game is very slow incremental card advantage. So when your opponents are Memory Deluge, Flashing Back Deluge, once I start doing that in the control deck, they can't catch up with their draw 1, you know, draw 1 like every other turn. And with the ramp decks doing the same thing, stuff like Atraxa, stuff like Up the Beanstalk, drawing you a million cards. The green-black deck is just a little bit too slow to keep pace with some of those, you know, late game decks, and then it's it's too slow to go under them, and then it's too the late game isn't powerful enough. But I do love the creature lands. I really think the creature lands are so powerful. Like you said, sweepers is a big problem for that deck, but just having the creature lands, I can't tell you how many times I've swept and been like, oh wait, I'm just gonna die to this Mishra's Factory plus Restless Cottage. Or I finally draw the Go for the Throat, kill their cottage, and then they untap and go, Tortoise, cottage is back, go. And I'm like, oh my god, I need graveyard hate.
And the other thing about the Restless Cottage that makes it so freaking good is that it's already a black-green dual land. So yeah, it entering tapped is a very real cost, but these decks can run 4 of it and not feel too bad at all because you just make sure to sequence your lands correctly, and you'll be able to curve out. And on the turn when you don't need it, a lot of time turn 1, you know, if you can get a cottage down on turn 1, whew, you are set up for success later in that game. And it's beautiful. It's this thing's nuts. I can't. I mean, in the tournament today, Damien, when you and I were watching it, we saw a couple people playing the Golgari mid-range list, and there was one point where I remember looking down and seeing 3 Restless Cottages on board. It's like, sure, go ahead and kill one. What are you gonna do?
Exactly. And, you know, it makes me smile to see, you know, when we have creature lands, you think you would see decks that play like Field of Ruin and stuff. But the same decks that are playing Restless Cottage are playing Blossoming Tortoise, and they don't give a damn about your Field of Ruin.
Go ahead, go for it.
You know, it's so.
We saw that
nice.
today.
Yep.
During the tournament, I was commenting. There was a guy. Yeah, there was a couple people playing Field of Ruin in their control decks, and I was like, wow, it's interesting. You know, you've got to be careful with how many colorless lands you play. One list had 5, you know, 3 Mirex and 2 Field of Ruin, and I was like, wow, in a 3-color deck, you got to be really careful with that. I also see, you know, but then the more we were talking about it during the tournament today, I was thinking, yeah, you know, Field of Ruin is, you know, primed for a comeback here. I think Field of Ruin actually, you know, against the Esper decks, they play like 1 to 2 basics. You know, the 5-color deck plays a bunch, but a lot of the other decks don't. Plus, there's a lot of creature lands seeing play. Now, Tortoise, you're right, doesn't really, you know, your creature lands are coming back. But the deck doesn't play 4 tortoises. Usually those green-black decks will only play 2, I think I've seen. I don't know how many
2,
play 4.
maybe 3.
It is a 4-drop.
Yeah.
But I could see maybe an uptick of Field of Ruin, and I'd be really interested to see the mono white shell come back with the 8 Field of Ruin effects. This plus demo field with the Resto Angels to bring, or whatever that other angel's called, to bring them back. And I hated
Sarah Paragon. Yeah, that was savage.
Sarah Paragon. Maybe now's the time because people are getting greedy again. Back then, people were getting greedy with Grixis, and now they're getting greedy with Esper. And even blowing up a Plaza of Heroes at the right moment is very crucial against Esper, or blowing up the creature land. Even if they can bring it back, you stop it from killing you. It's just another removal effect that might get you there. So I wonder if Field of Ruin ticks up in play because of green-black being a part of the metagame and this other stuff. But who knows?
Might have to give that a try. Yeah.
And speaking of decks, I mean, hey, not to toot my own horn here, but I am really enjoying this Jun Ramp deck I've been playing. Even though we designed it designed it for Fight Club, it's been doing really well for me, not just on the ladder, but I did just qualify in that best of 1 qualifier with it, even though it is a best of 3 deck.
Heck yeah, 2-2.
I love it.
Let's go.
I love that you took your Fight Club deck into the qualifier. Is fantastic. I love it. And then you got there. You got there. 7 wins.
And listeners, if you're not sure what we're talking about, Fight Club is it's a series that actually you can see over on my YouTube channel, Hamox42, and it's a streamer showcase where a bunch of streamers get together and show off weird janky brews against each other. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of pageantry. It's low stakes, so everybody can just go crazy. It's a good time. And so the idea of creating a deck with the intention of like showmanship and having a fun time, and it ends up putting up actual results. I love it. It's so cool.
And a huge reason, well, one of the reasons we are talking about Standard right now is because next week is HollywoodPizza's Jankathon, sponsored by none other than MagicJank.com. And so we have the winners who have won different slice tournaments and open tournaments from Hollywood Pizza's channel, and they're all coming together for a standard best of 3 event coming up on the next Sunday after you hear this podcast.
22nd.
Sunday, October 22nd, 2023. Yep.
And, it's really going to highlight a lot of the decks that we've been talking about today. Lots of decks that you might have seen, whether it's been the challenges or worlds or whatnot. It's called the Jankathon, so you might see some people bringing some jank, but jank that works.
Oh,
and we are totally down for it. I mean, there's money on the line, right? It's like $2,500 prize pool. Within the top 8. So we're playing for something. And all of those tournaments have been free to enter. They haven't cost a dime to anybody to qualify for these tournaments. So it's really going to showcase standard best of 3. We're going to see the updated meta, see if anybody's changing what they've been playing on the ladder or on Magic Online or in paper, if they've been playing standard in paper. I'm bringing the Jun Ramp deck to that event because it's legit. Really? I am going to be slamming some Tyrannix Rex on the battlefield. Like, that's what I'm about. That card can't be countered. Wandering Emperor ain't hitting it, and you can't leyline binding it early. So sounds good to me.
Might be the time.
It's a good one.
So it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, I'm surprised we don't see more of that card. It was obviously a big part of the metagame when the deck first debuted in that last Standard Pro Tour, where 5-color, made top 8 out of nowhere, and people were like, "Holy crap!" And he was playing 4 Tyrannix Rex in the sideboard, and then it still saw play after that as people copied the list. But here we are months later, and it seems like nobody's playing that card anymore. Which is odd, but I guess, I don't know, control's not really a big part of the metagame as much anymore, so maybe that's part of the reason. It's still super powerful, though, even if you're the uncounterability doesn't matter. The ward 4, like you said, already makes my Go for the Throat cost 6 mana. Like, that's annoying.
I tell you, these cards in Standard that have really impressed me, I mean, I think Wilds of Eldraine actually did add a lot to Standard and what we can play. They added Charming Scoundrel, which is... by far one of my favorite newer cards. That card is so versatile.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
From ramping you to drawing a card to dealing extra points of damage. Bramble Elemental that also has Fetch Quest attached to it. So it's another 7 mana sort of mini breach for yourself.
Silly.
And, Blossom and Tortoise, adding that to that whole mix allows for a good amount of ramp to occur with solid mana sources being put in play versus like ones that you can interact with and get rid of.
Mosswood Dread Knight, the grindy card advantage engine, a big add there as well. Definitely Jund got some tools for sure. The Jund colors out of Wilds of Eldraine.
It's finally time to put green back on the map, and green's been missing for some time out of our
green great again.
That's it.
Yep. Absolutely.
But it's funny you mentioned the Jankathon thing. This week I was testing, and my stream title was testing for the Jankathon tournament, and I'm playing standard. And I can't tell you how many people came into my channel, and at first I thought they were joking, but they were like, they would come in and go, "Wait, you're testing Jank, but you're playing Rafine," and I'm like, "What?" Like I was playing Esper midrange at the time, or whatever. And I'm like, "Yes," and they're like, "But what is this tournament? I thought you said it was a Jankathon tournament. You can't play Rafine," and I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Oh no, you think it's no? We don't have to play Jank. Is that why?" But so many people were misunderstood the name. They thought meant it was some kind of tournament where we weren't allowing, or the players all kind of just agreed to not play the best cards in the format or something. That we're only allowed to play Jank, quote unquote. And I'm like, no. I'm like, that's not what this is.
It's an understandable mistake. But yes, and the Jankathon, it is not 100% Jank. You are more than welcome to bring. Well, if you have qualified for the Jankathon, there's money on the line. Bring what you believe is going to give you the best chance to win. It is a legit tournament.
A real tournament.
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of tier 1 decks and then Carlo on Jund. But it's going to be you're probably going to win it all, watch.
Honestly, yeah. But, dude, I'm rooting for you. I don't know.
Hey.
I don't know what you're anyway, sorry, no. I'm going to be impartial the whole time, I promise. Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. Impartial as we commentators always are, right? But anyway.
Yeah. And you can watch it. It's going to be streamed on Hollywood's channel, so check it out on HollywoodPizza on twitch.com. And also, get involved in the other tournaments. I'm sure this is going to be a yearly thing. So get your qualification early. Start playing those pizza opens and pizza slice tournaments. But it should be fun. You have your deck locked in, man. I'm still. I don't know what I'm gonna play yet.
Yeah. And for those of you who are listening, so Hollywood Pizza does run 3 free tournaments a month. So he'll probably release his November schedule. I think he did release it, but he'll be announcing it again at the Jankathon for 3 free tournaments in November. Normally does 2 standard and 1 explorer, just to throw a little format into the mix-up. So if you want to check that out, all of those tournaments are always free to play. So you can register for them for free. You just submit your deck on Melee or possibly another platform. And you can sign up for that tournament, show up, check in, play in your pajamas at home.
Yeah.
Great.
And if you're able to stream your matches onto Discord, you can get featured on Hollywood Pizza's Twitch channel, and then have wonderful commentators talk about your game or how ridiculous your deck is.
I will rip your deck to pieces.
I will talk about how beautiful it is and how I'm sad it lost. Don't worry. How much I want it to be good and how much I appreciate you for giving it a try. Anyway.
So make sure you check all those out. And it's really much appreciated. They always do have awesome sponsors. Of course, MagicJank.com being one of them. Not biased at all, but hey, MagicJank.com has lots of things that you can do.
They're pretty great.
Absolutely.
Well, I wanted to add that, I know a lot of players who want to get into competitive Magic. They want to dabble. They want to dip their toes in, but they're intimidated. And I understand. I remember the first time I played, competitive, my first PTQ or whatever back in those days when there were PTQs. And I was nervous, and I, didn't do well or whatever. But once you get into it and, you're unfamiliar with the pairings and how does this work and how do all these things work. Digitally, it's so easy on MTG Melee and to just play in these tournaments. I think if you're ever nervous about getting to competitive Magic, this is the perfect stepping stone to do it because it's 0 stakes. You don't have to buy in with anything. You can, like Carlos said, do it from your own home in your pajamas if you want on MTG Melee. And once you do, you'll realize I can do this. Holy crap! I went 4-2 today, or 4-3. That's pretty good. I actually played against tier 1 decks. My deck did pretty well, or whatever. Or even maybe you don't do so well and you go, you know what? Interesting. Now I get an idea of what people are doing. Let me go back to the drawing board. It's just such a nice, low, easy stakes kind of small stepping stone to get to actual competitive Magic. So if you're ever on the fence about getting into it, this is kind of the nicest, easiest way to get into it. A lot of people are playing their own rogue decks and whatnot in these tournaments as well. So it's always fun to see, and the bar is kind of low for entry. Obviously, no buy-in, and also people playing all kinds of weird decks. So really good tournament to get your feet wet or whatever, dip your toes in.
Yeah, but, and hey, like we understand some of us might be playing Arena on free to play, and we don't have all the cards. And that's the number one place where you can go to test out exactly what you want to play, what you've been playing on the ladder, and you ever question yourself, how would this do in a competitive setting? Like, that's the place for free when it costs you no money. So can't stress it. It's better. Make sure you're signing up for them.
It's better testing than the ladder. It's way 100%. Better. You know, opponents aren't they're not just going to rope you, and they're not going to like. You're not going to be playing against all kinds of wacky stuff. You get to the top 8, it's going to be a lot of tier 1 decks, as we saw today in the top 8. But so check that out, and stay tuned next week for our Jankathon. I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about that on the podcast after, once it's done, and update everyone on Standard. And the results from that tournament might even make their way onto the MTG Goldfish, MTG top 8 and stuff. I know the Pizza Box tournaments usually are on there. Should maybe even have an effect on the metagame. Maybe the Jund deck starts seeing play after
who knows?
Redo debuts it.
After Carlo goes undefeated and just skates into the top 8 of the Jankathon,
watch
it's going to happen, and John Midrange is going to be the talk of the town.
We're all going to blame Carlo. Yeah, we'll blame him.
We've done it. We've done it once with Demir.
That's true. So you were banging the Demir drum before a lot of other folks, and sure enough,
that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, do we have any jank mail to go over?
As of this moment, I do not believe we do. So
I'm gonna have to start sending us an email just under a pseudo. Like, I'm gonna make a fake profile and just start asking you guys questions about your personal lives or something. So we have something.
Fair enough. Yeah. But yes, if you do have questions that you want to have us address live on the podcast, anyway, pre-recorded here on the podcast, you can do so. Go ahead and tweet at us or post on X to us at MagicJank with the hashtag JankMail, or you can also hop into our Discord server, and we do have a channel for that, so feel free to just throw those out there. We would love to interact with you guys. If you have any questions, or if you have any thoughts, if you're wondering, hey, why haven't they talked about X? Whatever that is, whatever it is that Magic is a very, very deep game. And we all have a lot of thoughts across a lot of different formats and a lot of different ways to interact with the game. There's no way we can predict every single thing that, you listeners would like to hear. So let us know. Yeah.
And I'm bad at being creative and coming up with new things. I need your help. All the people listening out there, please tell us what to talk about on the next episode. We're struggling here.
That's the thing. Whenever you go to a streamer or you see something and they're like, oh, they're taking community feedback to help with their content. It's like, it's stuff they don't have to write. It's great. Anyway, sorry, I'm giving the game away here. I'm sorry. But no, for real, we would love to hear from all of you. And as of late, and we're also in a phase right now where we have new products coming out and whatnot. But now the World Championship is in the rear view. Things are going to be a little slow from the competitive perspective for a little bit. Aside from a few of these events here and there. We will have opportunities to fill in the gaps and talk about evergreen topics related to Magic. So now's a great time to bring those questions in. Please, hit us up.
But with that, I think we've covered everything. So I hope you guys. You're going to be commentating maybe the Jankathon, Ham.
I believe I am. Yes, that is. I'm planning on be there. Yeah, I'll be there with bells on. So yeah.
It's me, Carlo. Who else? Is anybody from Team Jank playing in it? Numbskull qualified.
I think Numbskull qualified. Yep.
Yeah. So there's gonna be 3 of us. We gotta represent Team Jank. What if we multiple of us get in top 8? That would be fantastic. Before you ask, I'm not gonna scoop you into top 8. I'm not. I'm sorry.
Oh damn.
Just kidding. That's what teams are for. If I'm like X and O or something, I'm definitely scooping whoever into top 8 if I can. I don't know how that works actually. I've never done it on MTG Melee. I guess you can just message your opponent and be like, "Hey, do you want to ID this? Like we're both X and 1?"
You actually can't ID in these tournaments.
You can. Okay, that's what I was gonna ask. So I can't. Oh, okay, yeah. Yep. Interesting.
Play every round.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense because I've never seen anybody do it. So I'm like, okay, yeah, it must be.
It means everybody's getting savaged every round. It's great.
Nice.
We're here to play.
Yeah. It should be fun.
Very cool.
But good luck, and hopefully it's a sweet tournament to watch. Tune in, everybody, next Sunday.
Yeah. Absolutely. But yes, thank you everybody for tuning in. We do appreciate it. Huge thank you to MagicJank.com, the online marketplace where you can buy and sell Magic the Gathering products. And yeah, until next time, everybody, have a fantastic rest of the week, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.